Welcome to Lake Billy Chinook, Oregon. If you tuned in to hear why that structure behind me is your ticket to your first, your biggest, the state or the world record bull trout, you're in the right place. And if you want to see what I'm using and have some fun to try and get my state or world record, stick around to the end and I'll show you some cool stuff. But anyway, welcome to Lake Billy Chinook, Oregon. This is a significant body of water right in the middle of the state of Oregon near the town of Madras. That structure you see behind me on this side right here, that's the Round Butte Dam. That's one of the top 25 largest dams in your country, the United States of America, and it is about 525 feet tall, thereabouts, an earthen-filled structure, and its location is just downstream of the confluence of the Metolius River, which comes in from the west. I don't know if you can see Mount Jefferson over here. Let me turn the camera a little bit. You can see that or not, but Mount Jefferson, parts of Mount Jefferson drain into the Metolius River. That comes in from the west. That's a very cold stream that's spring-fed, comes out of the base of the Cascade Mountains on the east slope, drains into Lake Billy Chinook at about 12 to 1,500 cubic feet per second. You know, that's a cubic foot of water per second. 12 to 1,500 of those are coming into the lake all the time, every single day, year-round. So from the south, we have the Deschutes River, and then from the east, we have a very large river basin called the Crooked River Basin. The Crooked River coming in from the east, draining much of the Orgeon National Forest and beyond. And so the other structure that you see right there that sticks out from the edge of the dam, that's called the Selective Water Withdrawal and the Fish Collection Facility. Now let me get into all this stuff and let you know how and why this is important to you as an angler, because there's a lot of unintended consequences here, and the unintended consequences rarely benefit anglers, and in this case there's some awesome opportunities for you I want to talk about and I want to introduce you to if you don't know. This dam has been in place since the late 1950s and early 1960s and filled up in the 1964 flood, and salmon and steelhead used to come up the river you see there behind me to just beyond this place, a place called Steelhead Falls, but they both entered the Metolius and the Crooked River to the east, and a small tributary stream of the Deschutes that comes in below Steelhead Falls called Deschutes Creek. So this dam had a major impact on the salmon and steelhead runs of the Deschutes Basin, and for the longest time, they couldn't make it through. It wasn't the upstream migration that was the issue, it was the downstream migration. The fish would come down from the lake into the lake from the streams above, and there was only about 150, 200 cubic feet per second bypass down here at the corner of the dam somewhere to collect them and then get them into a truck or a fish ladder that would take them around the rest of the dams. On the way up, they're caught in a trap and they're expected to swim a long fish ladder around several dams. Of course, there's one dam below this called Pelton Dam, which forms Lake Simtustus, and then the re-regulating dam, which allows the Deschutes River to flow at a constant flow. So the fish would have to come all the way around those. And so all that pretty much struggled because the emphasis was put on the dam, not on the fish. And so 50 years later, the license from the federal government, from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, was up for renewal, and in that process, the discussion to reintroduce salmon and steelhead above the dam was brought up, and that's what we ended up doing. So now in 2026, we've been doing it for over a decade or more, 15 years or more, and we've been trying to reintroduce salmon above the dam. And that's where the fish collection facility comes in. There's been a lot of modeling, a lot of engineering, a lot of studies to figure out that we need to have a large attraction flow, one that's as great as the maximum flow from all these rivers coming in. That's why I talked about that cubic foot per second. This structure here that you see behind me, it has the ability to take up to, I think, 7,000 or 10,000 CFS in of the surface to create an attraction flow to attract those juvenile salmon, steelhead, and then of course there's kokanee in here, which is a landlocked sockeye that was introduced here when the lake was put in. The bull trout have been feeding on those. They want to liberate some of those and send them out to the ocean and have a sockeye run. So that's supposed to attract them, collect them, and then we can work them up as biologists and let them go and come back to the ocean. So we struggled for a while figuring out how to do that, but recently we've had two nice, really good runs of steelhead, 800 to 900 fish plus returning from the ocean to the dam. I've caught a few, other friends of mine have caught a few. So they're pushing the fish through the lake, down the river below, out to the ocean. They come back, they get in a truck, they come back up here to the lake, they get released, then they can go do their business in the tributaries above. I know what you're thinking, Scott, we just created a fish run with a carbon footprint by driving around in a truck everywhere. It's like, yeah, I hear you. We'll leave those discussions for another video. But we've successfully figured out to some level how to get fish around this dam and have steelhead from above go to the ocean and come back. That's a pretty cool science experiment, I'd say. Probably pretty expensive or whatever. But the reality is, inside there in that ecological system, there's some somewhat unintended consequences. I think people knew this was going to happen, but it benefits anglers, right? The Metolius River is full of bull trout. It's one of our most robust, healthiest bull trout populations in the country. If you don't know about bull trout, they're the one. Salvelinus, confluentus, they're like cold water, you know, pristine habitat, that kind of thing. We have a lot of it here in the Metolius River on the east slopes of the Cascades of Oregon. And with this lake and the cold pool water that's formed by the dam, and then of course the kokanee is a food source which has the life cycle of a salmon. So there's like a lot of juveniles that come out of the river and live here in the lake and grow up to about maybe about a 10-14 incher, and then they go up the river and do their thing and come back again through that cycle. The bull trout have adapted to that and have done pretty well, and you've always been able to come here and catch a nice bull trout. But now, since the reintroduction effort, we're juicing the system with a whole nother 2 species of salmon smolts, Chinook salmon and steelhead, and releasing about 600,000, 300,000 of each, where the data shows only about 30%, 25 to 30% are making it to the fish collection facility to be shipped out to the ocean. So a bunch of those fish are disappearing somewhere in the system, right? And we can understand that, you know, survival of salmon in the Northwest, hatchery or wild, is usually pretty low. So, you know, we put a lot of eggs in the gravel. A lot of them we don't get any fish back for them for various reasons. One of those is predation, right? And so here we have a lot of ospreys, we have a lot of eagles, you know, in the river system. There's otters. And then of course there's bull trout. And then there's a known growing population of brown trout in this lake. And so those species, especially the fish, are taking advantage of that free introduced food source that comes every year about this time in the middle of spring, late April, early May, when the fish get released from their acclimation tanks in the rivers and creeks above, and they come down to the lake. Now, I wanted to bring that to your attention if you haven't heard of it. A lot of the local people around here, this is a popular fishery. You can see some of the boats trolling the boom line out there. You know, in theory, salmon are migrating down or whatever, that's attracting them, and there's fish out here that have figured it out and are patrolling too. I know in the fish collection facility they've caught probably a state record or maybe even a world record bull trout or two that's gotten a little too close and got collected him or herself. So that's always interesting. But in 2023, an angler, Ryan Majeski out of Bend, who was in the ODF&W, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife news releases back then, he caught a fish down here that he measured at 33.5 inches long, 26-inch girth. It bottomed out his net scale at 25 pounds. He's calling it the unofficial state record because it broke the previous state record that came from a time prior to the salmon and steelhead reintroduction, prior to all that new food in the system. That state record was 23 pounds. Ryan's fish bottomed it out at his scale at 25. He thinks it was bigger than that. It's kind of the unofficial state record. That was in 2023. That's one period of time where we've been feeding them for some time with this reintroduction food source. And so I think there's easily a state record for you and a state record for me out there, and there's probably a world record or two in this lake, along with some great kokanee fishing, some awesome scenery, and a potentially, you know, a 25-inch bull trout or a brown trout, sorry. So that's generally how it goes. You know, I've talked to a few anglers at the boat ramp and here in town where I live, and I've heard recently that if you're out here when these fish, because these are small river, you know, these are rivers that are, they're not small per se, but they can be as the season progresses in the summer and the flows come down. We turn on the irrigation that takes flow out to the farms, the river level drops, we put the salmon and steelhead in. It's kind of a natural reaction, you know, that's what's occurring in the natural environment. So any wild salmon and steelhead that might be in the rivers or the creeks below the dam, or say the John Day or another river near here, they're leaving to go to the ocean at the same time too. So the creeks, they're not a place where the fish are going to hide. They're going to get low and warm, and so they need to move out, and that's kind of how the salmon ecology works here in the high desert of Oregon. So they push them into this lake, or they get pushed into this lake, and when they hit this lake, they're not used to that. It's very disorientating environment. And so what I've heard is that if you're here at the right place at the right time, when that happens and a couple 100,000 or tens of thousands of fish are making it into the lake at one time, the birds are keying on it and the fish are keying on it, and you kind of get this fishing experience where you see some potential bull trout herding defenseless, disorientated salmon and steelhead smolts into the steep cliff lines and things like that, and you get some busting at the surface and things that resemble kind of a cool ocean fishery or something like that we don't always get to experience. So I want to see some of that. I love to catch trout. I want to catch big trout. This is pretty awesome. It's not very far from my house, so I want to experience that. I wanted to bring that to your guys' attention, and I wanted to take a few minutes to stop and show you what I'm using. One of the lures I'm going to show you guys, you know, is a Bassmaster Classic winner. Be cool to catch something out here on that with a bull trout on it. And then, of course, you know, I'm into the fish finder jigs, the hair jig thing. You've heard, if you've watched any of my other videos lately, I'm going to be opening up an online store to let you guys use some of the stuff that I use on my channel, or most of the stuff I use on my channel, at least the hair jig stuff. So I've got one of those I want to show you real quick. But if you like what you're watching, please consider subscribing. Sorry. That's the one thing that makes my channel really grow, is subscription and engagement with the viewers. So if this is stuff you like, you're not seeing this stuff anywhere else, I don't think, on YouTube. So give me that thumbs up, give me that like, give me that subscription, drop a comment in there, tell me I'm crazy. So let's jump into what I'm using. Let's start with the good stuff first. There she is right there. That's mine, actually. The one that I'm going to be taking out on the lake here later this week. Let me take it out of the bag. This is my 5/16 ounce fish finder jig. It's tied up like a juvenile salmon or steelhead. It's got that barred tail, that red eye, that gill plate, and that rainbow flash in there. I try to make it like a rainbow. Pretty cool. I'm going to have these in 1/4 and 1/16. In the lake, it's going to be super finesse because that fur is just going to dance. You know, where in the river, it kind of gets matted down a little bit by the current and gets to dance every time you let it pulse, you know, with the rod. But in the lake, this is going to look really good, and I've had really good success with my jigs in the lake. So I do have about, let's see, about 5 or 6 packages, 2 packs in here in the fish finder jig, set up to go on the fishfinderjigs.com store. Get you guys into some big brown, some big bull trout or whatever. I know it's a little late in the season, but I've been busy trying to get this stuff rolling and make videos at the same time. One of the other cool things that I'm interested to try this year, which I haven't tried yet, I picked up a bunch of these. I hope to catch some smallmouth and make a video on that as well, is the Maverick 110 from Rapala. I'm thinking this thing is going to look like a nice morsel juvenile salmon or steelhead or coconut, any bull trout out there. And sure, a lot of these boats are trolling to cover the water, you know, and they're trolling deep with downriggers and stuff like that. I've done well in the past, and I'll show you a bull trout when I was a little younger that I caught here with my son when he was younger. We both got one. And I think it was about a 6-7 pounder. You know, we were trolling, but then you go out and cast, and that's where the jigs come in, and you can cast lures like this, as you guys know. I forget exactly how long this one is. It's 4 3/8 inches. So that's a pretty good size bait. My jig measures out, the fish finder jig measures out at about 4. That's where I wanted to keep it. The smaller ones you guys see me use on the river, those are around 3 inches. And so as far as the lure that won the Bassmaster Classic that I know is going to work out here when I find the big schools pushing bait into the cliff lines, I haven't yet to play with these. I played with other plastics. You know, I'm a trout angler, so this stuff I don't really get it flashed in front of me in the social media right off the bat because this is the bass stuff. But man, I did some research and looking into the Crush City from Rapala, the freeloader. This is their big boy right here. I'm going to be fishing one of these on the hybrid swim bait jig. You saw Jacob Wheeler win the classic on this, Gunnersville. So I've been watching a lot of those videos, geeking out on the different hover jig and the ways that those guys put big baits like this or big white soft plastics in front of bass that are suspended real deep. Well, we have the same kind of deal going on here. You know, you got the kokanee and now the reintroduced salmon and steelhead smolts kind of schooling at the surface because that's how they orientate and find their direction. Down deep in the depths, they don't know where to go. So they're kind of a surface orientated fish, and you see that with the kokanee out here kind of poking and popping at the surface. And we know that those big bull trout, they come below them. So when I find those, I'm gonna have one of these rigged up on that screw lock swim bait and get it out there fast and just let that little tail work like Jacob Wheeler did and see if my trophy comes up to tickle it. And of course, you know, you don't need to always start with the big one. They make a little bit smaller. So this Crush City right here, that's the 5 1/4. That's probably about the right size for a steelhead smolt. But if you want a little bit smaller one, there's the next size down, the 4 1/4. So I plan to be popping these. Some other places this summer where we've got some similar reservoirs in the system here further up that have big brown trout in them with a dam, a big rock face, wind blown kokanee. So you're gonna get some bait that's just hiding and being stuck in there with the wind. And this type of stuff is where I'm gonna be throwing it. You know, this type of stuff. And then of course the fish finder jig, it's always the best thing you can ever tie onto your end of your line anywhere you go. And that's why I'm gonna bring it to market so you guys can experience it as well. So if this is information that's good to you, it's valuable, like I said, thanks for coming. I appreciate your time. Please consider subscribing. Please consider joining Fish Finder Jig Nation through Red Bandy Outdoors here. I'm Scott. I truly appreciate your time. Thank you.